Hey everybody, welcome to Kiseki Month here on SuperDerek RPGs. All month long, all of March, I'm going to be putting out at least one video per week talking about the Trails series. Make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss any of them. Let's go ahead and talk about my most asked question as of right now, which is, what's the best way to start playing the Trails series? And people are really curious about where to get started because there are just so many games, and 10 games in a series, that's a huge commitment. You don't want to miss out on any of the incredible games that are already out there, but you don't want to waste your time on the stinkers, right? And then you want to get to the good stuff as fast as possible, and it's just hard to get caught up when you're 10 games behind already. So obviously a lot of people want to kind of skip around, and I'm not going to tell you that that's the wrong way to do it. In fact, I'm not going to tell you the correct way to do it at all, because there is no correct way to do it, despite what some people might tell you. If you're curious, make sure you stick around. But first, today's episode is brought to you by NIS America and their upcoming release of Trails to Azure. If you've seen my review of Trails to Azure, then you already know this is one of my favorite games of all time. But with the official release being brought to PC, PS4, and Nintendo Switch by NIS America, the game is even better than ever, and it's never been easier to lose yourself into this intense and intrigue-packed RPG. The enhanced port by NIS America to PC and Nintendo Switch pushes this game even further in collaboration with Durante. Enjoy the game with higher resolution textures and character sprites, improved lighting, and enhanced water effects. And one of my favorite features, the option to turn on auto advance on the Japanese voice-acted dialogue, is baked in from the start. Follow Lloyd Bannings, a detective of Crossbow Police Department's Special Support Section, as he investigates a series of mysterious incidents, monster appearances, and events that threatens the autonomy of Crossbow and beyond. If you, like so many others, started the Trails series with Cold Steel but never played the Crossbow games, you only know half the story. Don't miss out on this conclusion to an incredible arc in the Trails series. Pick up a copy today using a link in this video's description. Thank you NIS America for sponsoring this portion of today's video. But if you're not even sure what these games are or if they're good or not, well, yes, they're great. And here's a spoiler-free review of Trails from Zero and a spoiler-free review of Trails in the Sky FC. So you'll want to check those out if maybe you want to look into the series to see if it's a good place to get started. So anyways, this video is going to pretty much just assume that you've already decided that you want to play these games and you're just not sure how to get started, where's a good jumping in point. In that case, the short answer is start somewhere, anywhere. Basically, don't let anything anybody else says make you feel overwhelmed to the point where you feel like you've got to play 10 games and oh my gosh, just may as well not even start. That's not what I'm trying to do here at all. The important way to start playing the Trails games is to start. But there's a lot of other considerations that you might want to make about, choosing a jumping in point. And I'm going to try to help you walk through some of those questions for yourself and, see where you land. In order to kind of find the best jumping in points, let's go ahead and just weed out some of the really bad jumping in points. Obviously, you don't want to start in the middle of an arc, okay? That'd be like jumping into your favorite anime like halfway through the season. You won't want to jump in at just any random point in an anime, neither would you want to do so in Trails, right? You want to find maybe, if not at the very beginning, at least the beginning of a new arc so that you're introduced to most of the characters that are super important to the story that it's going to tell. And maybe it sounds obvious to not jump in with Cold Steel 2, right? Obviously, right? Because Cold Steel 1 lays a lot of the groundwork. But there are some games out there that are coming out and some that are already out that don't have names that are quite that obvious. So Trails to Azure, for instance, is a sequel to Trails from Zero. So don't start with Trails to Azure. Second, Trails into Reverie. That is a game that is technically not part of Cold Steel or Crossbow, but it is also the conclusion of both of those stories. So you would want to start with one of the first entry points. And there are three, at this point, at least here in the United States, there are three main possible jumping in points. And I'm not going to say that they're all equally good, but they're all equally valid as a starting in point. And that's Trails in the Sky FC, which stands for first chapter, Trails from Zero, which is the game that comes before Azure, and then Trails of Cold Steel 1, which is also the game that comes before Trails of Cold Steel 2, 3, and 4. Now, here's some maybes, okay? Because technically, Falcom's president, Toshihiro Kondo, said that Trails of Cold Steel 3 would be kind of a jumping in point. but the fan base in general kind of disagrees on that point. Take that one with a big grain of salt as a maybe. And as another maybe, we have another game that it's coming to the West eventually, but as far as I know, it's not currently in the process of being brought to the West just yet, so it's a ways off. But that is Kuro no Kiseki, or maybe it will eventually be translated as Trails of Into Darkness, Trails of Black, I don't know. Now, Kuro no Kiseki is out in Japan. I haven't really seen too much of it because I'm trying to avoid spoilers. I'll call that one a maybe because it's the beginning of a brand new chapter, a brand new arc. Is it going to be a good jumping in point? I don't know. It's really tough to say just yet. All right, so let's work with one of those 3 certified frosty jumping in points for the Trails series. How do you pick one? Well, there's a few different schools of thought here, okay? There's the de facto one, I would say, is the playing through in order of chronological release, and that's what I've done, but I'm not going to tell you that that's what you must do. Here are the pros and cons of this. Get all the info that you need as you need it. Like, it's going to drip feed this information to you slowly and not too soon, not too late. When you play your way through the game, you always have all of the information that the developers expect you to have. You will never be way too overwhelmed with everything all at once trying to get caught up. It eases you into the world of the Trails series. You won't miss out on really any of the references from previous games. That's one of those things that we as players who play in chronological release order benefit from. Also, you have the benefit of making all the purists on the internet very happy. Also, every new game that you play in this order has new quality of life improvements that makes it easier to jump forward in the series. However, there are some cons that come with this approach. Trails in the Sky FC would be your jumping in point, and it is not really the new hotness. It is not the trendy game of the moment, so the internet's not all abuzz about it, and it would take you some time to get to one of the games that people are really buzzed about. It can be overwhelming to add 10 new games to your backlog, and if tackling your backlog is something that you struggle with, I actually have a couple of videos talking about how to defeat your backlog and beat RPGs the SuperDerek way, and it's a little bit about time management and just kind of making your way through your backlog if that's something that you want to do. If not, don't worry about it, but if that's something that you struggle with, check out one of the videos. I'll have it linked in the corner. And then the final con is that Trails in the Sky can be somewhat complicated to really play on modern platforms. And what I mean by that is it has release options on the PlayStation Portable, but they're kind of dated and don't really look super good. The PC port looks fantastic, and there are some quality of life mods on it that make it a really great way to play, but a lot of, I think, my viewers are really into console games, and there's not really a great console experience to play these on for the time being. But if you have a PC and if you're good with installing these games from Steam and stuff, they're usually pretty inexpensive and on sale. Not a bad way to get started, but you have to have a PC, and I know that some of my viewers just don't. For people who have a Vita or like a PlayStation TV, there are the Evo games that never were released in the West, but there are fan translation patches and stuff that might make that a more viable choice. It's not as easy to get into these games, but if you have a PC that was made in like the last 10 years, there's a good chance that even your crappy old graphics card or integrated graphics could run this passably well enough that you would really enjoy the experience. They're not really AAA experiences, if you know what I mean. Another jumping in point would be to start playing what we call the Crossbow Series, which is when you would jump in with Trails from 0 and then go on to play Trails to Azure. The pros on this is that it's really accessible to play these all on modern platforms right now. They're all on Nintendo Switch, they're all on PC, they're all on PlayStation 4, and the Nintendo Switch is probably the version that I think a lot of you guys are going to want to go for. The whole arc is just phenomenal. And then another pro is that this arc is really only just 2 games long. Now, they're pretty long games, but 2 games, if you just add those to your backlog, not as daunting, right? As opposed to if you approach it from the perspective of, oh, I gotta play all 10 games in the series. You don't have to. You could just add these 2, see what you think, you know, or just try the first one, see what you think. And if you liked it, well, you're halfway done. You can finish the arc in just 1 more game, right? So that's just one of the side benefits of starting with the Crossbow arc, but there are some cons. There are some characters that you will come across for the first time playing this game that are characters who existed in the previous games, and you're gonna miss out on a lot of context that other players who play in chronological release would have. The other issue is that by skipping Trails in the Sky series, you would be skipping one of the greatest arcs in the franchise. There are pros and there are cons. I won't tell you that it's right or wrong to jump in here. It is just another option, and It's an accessible way to get started. And it's got a bunch of quality of life improvements that weren't already in Sky that I think a lot of people would probably really appreciate. And then if you were to start with the Trails of Cold Steel series, you would be among a lot of really good company. A lot of people started with Cold Steel because this is about when the series started really gaining traction in the West. So you can play them all on modern PlayStation consoles. So basically, you can play it if you have a Vita or a PlayStation 3, but the recommended version would probably be to play it on PC or PlayStation 4, or playing it with a PlayStation 5 using the PlayStation 4 version of the game. Another really good benefit of starting with Trails of Cold Steel, though, is that you'll be basically jumping into something that's still mostly current. People are still talking about it. It's still a pretty popular JRPG franchise at this point. And if you are familiar with the Persona series, it might be an easy transition into the Kiseki series. Cold Steel borrows pretty heavily from the Persona series, including something kind of like social links. They have follow-up attacks, 3 days in which you can spend hanging out with your friends. It's kind of in a school setting. So I will say that it's less stressful than the social links are in Persona. There's no like guessing around. Am I going to improve this link? Am I going to need to equip a certain persona? It's way more streamlined than Persona. So you don't really have to stress over it. If that was a deterrent from you playing this game, don't let that be. There are some cons though, and that is that you'd be skipping 2 of the greatest arcs in the series. And some people say that, you know, Cold Steel spoils some parts of the Crossbow games. I think that's, you know, probably very accurate. I think a lot of developers expected people to play Crossbow before diving into Cold Steel. But then there are some people who say, no, it's the Crossbow series that spoils Trails of Cold Steel. But that's a whole convoluted argument that I'm just gonna not try and approach at all. It doesn't matter. If you decide to play these games, you're gonna love them anyway. So those are the major pros and cons, but why would anybody pick one over the other? This is really, I think, what it's gonna come down to for a lot of people, and that is Trails in the Sky is kind of a, you know, it's a drip feeder of information. It's not doing the fire hose approach, which is really helpful. It's really a great way to start playing these games, because a lot of the other games is just a fire hose of information, and as you try to get caught up, it can be overwhelming, and I don't want anybody to be overwhelmed. I am easily overwhelmed, and by playing in order of chronological release, I was able to really understand a lot of the machinations that were going on behind the scenes as these series continue, and I would really hate for anybody else to be overwhelmed and turned off by that fire hose of information of trying to catch up, you know, from behind. If you're not the kind of person who can feel overwhelmed by political intrigue and learning entire like cultural systems and laws and governances and stuff, like, sure, then do whatever, man. You're good. But if you're like me, playing them in order is a nice steady ramp of information, and that really was important to me. Also, playing in order of release is how the developers intended their fan base to be playing through them. There's not really any way to argue against that. And also, the stories of each of these arcs kind of takes a different approach to storytelling. And I think this is going to be one of those things that also will be a big determining factor for a lot of people. Because, for instance, Sky feels like an adventure shonen, you know? I made a lot of comparisons to the Grandia series when I first played through the game. The Crossbow series, though, feels more like a 1980s buddy cop movie, kind of like an underdog story. It's a vibe in and of itself, you know? Whereas Cold Steel feels a lot more like a Persona game, kind of a coming-of-age story that it tells, with some sci-fi influences towards the end of the game. And if that appeals to you, then Cold Steel is probably the way to go. All of that, just again, is the long version. But I want to recap all of this with just the short version again, which is it doesn't really matter what order you play them in. It does not matter. As long as you play them. Don't let anybody here tell you that, no, you must play in this order or that order. And if you are one of those people who considers themselves a purist, who wants to deem from on high what the correct order of play should be, let me tell you, you know, there are better and worse ways of playing games. But by being overly vitriolic about this, by being overly dogmatic, you're just pushing players away from the games. Like, let people play in whatever order they want. All right. Anyways, I've been SuperDerek, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you would like to see more Trails content, get subscribed because I've got a whole bunch more planned for this month, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.